what a mighty God we serve today. I was praying, typically you would see a female up here on Mother's Day. Typically that's how it works. I have tried to over the years avoid Mother's Day messages because it is a difficult time of year typically for me, but this year it was just something the Lord placed upon my heart here a couple of weeks ago, and so I just want to obey the Lord this morning and share with you what God placed upon my heart. If you'll turn me to the book of Ruth, chapter number 1. Book of Ruth, chapter number 1. And I do appreciate all the ladies each year that have stepped up and filled in to speak for Mother's Day. It's amazing. I've tried to lift different ladies in the church, especially, ones that are comfortable with, for the most part, for getting up in front of people. And you would think, well, they're comfortable because they teach Sunday school or what have you, but when I say, can you speak for us for Mother's Day, but I appreciate them. Had one tell me the other day, I'm going to die. What was it? I'm going to die 10 deaths between now and then. I said, well, after you're resurrected, it should be real good. But I'm thankful for each one of them. Ruth chapter number 1. I'm going to read verses 19 through 21. Ruth chapter number 1, verses 19 through 21. So they too went until they came to Bethlehem. And it came to pass, when they were come to Bethlehem, that all the city was moved about them. Listen, and they said, is this Naomi? And she said unto them, call me not Naomi. Isn't that your name? She said, call me Mara. For the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home again empty. Why then call ye me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me? What was Naomi, or Mara, or whatever her name, what was the issue here? Well, you have to know the meaning. Naomi and Mara, that doesn't mean anything to us. But when you look up the names, Naomi means pleasant. Mara means bitter. She said unto them, call me not pleasant, call me bitter. And she listed why. Because of her circumstances. Just want to share with you today, Mom, it's not life circumstances that created your identity. Or create your identity for that matter. You don't even create your own identity. The Lord has already given you your identity. He chose you to be the mom of those children. He chose you to serve in that capacity. You just need to learn to identify. That's what I want to talk to you about this morning, a mother's identity. Father, we love you today. Thank you for each one of our moms that is present here with us this morning. I'm thankful for our moms that have gone on. We cherish their memory today. And I ask you, Father God, for strength and anointing to deliver this word where you placed it upon my heart. And I just pray, Heavenly Father, that you would just speak to the hearts of each mother today. They will know their true identity rests in what you have chosen them to be and what you have called them to be. And we just praise you and thank you for what's going to be accomplished through this service today. And we honor our moms and we honor you most of all. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. You may be seated. The book of Ruth. I've often read this book of Ruth and thought, man, this could be also called the book of Naomi, because the underlying theme throughout this book includes Naomi. And as we look at this and we begin to see these 4 chapters unfold in front of our eyes, the story begin to unfold verse by verse, chapter after chapter. There is so much that is put in this small book of the Bible. There is so much that is contained within the words of this chapter. But ultimately what comes out of this chapter and what comes out of this story and this line that falls and flows through this is a lineage. It's a lineage that begins with a worshiper. And that worshiper and goes down through the bloodline, and you can trace the bloodline of Jesus, the man Jesus, all the way back to this point and to this place. And so we begin to see that unfold. But as you back up before our text here in Ruth chapter 1, you find that Naomi and her husband and her 2 sons, they're in Bethlehem, and there's a famine that hits the land. And Naomi, being the woman of God that she is, and being the biblical wife and mother that she is, she may have not necessarily supported and thought it was a great idea to do what her husband did, but she understood the pressure that he was under because there was a famine in the land, and she understood his identity as head of the home, and his identity to be provider, and his identity to make a decision that he thought was best for her and for the boys, that he could not sit there in a famine and let his family die. How many knows that in tough times, people make tough decisions? The old saying says, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. But the problem is what he did, Chilion did here, is he didn't get going and bear out and live out and try to survive out the famine. He got going. He left. And so when they left, begins to see what happens here. What happens, it says in verses 1 and 2, gives us some little background. So it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and the certain man of Bethlehem, Judea, we're talking about names, you have to understand that, is house of bread. He was in the house of bread. Just because there was no bread in the house didn't change the fact that it was the house of bread. Right? And so it was just going through a tough time. He went to sojourn in the country of Moab, him and his wife and his 2 sons. And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife was Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons, I called him by one of his sons' name, Elimelech. His sons were Mahlon and Chilion, the Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judea. And they came into the country of Moab. And once again, look up the name. The word Moab means worldliness. So they left the house of bread to go to the world. And so what he did, this man had done in this time of famine, in this time of hardship, instead of staying in the house of bread, even when there's times that it was tough and it was times that it was hard, he thought maybe there's something better for me and my family in Moab. And men, there's a challenge to us here that we need to make sure that we make right decisions. Never look to the world. There's going to be times in the house of bread. There's going to be times in the house of God. There's going to be times in our worship and our serving the Lord. Listen, there's going to be moments that it gets tough at church. Anybody ever been there? There's going to be times that we're going to wonder, is there any bread in the house? Where is the bread? It may seem like we're going through spiritual famine. Has anybody in your spiritual walk, individually, ever gone through a famine? I have. We've gone through an individual famine. Can I tell you that there's times that the church as a whole will feel like that we're going through a spiritual famine. We're going to go through seasons. If I say season, you think winter, spring, summer, or fall, and we can all name our favorite one. Thank God we only have 2 here in Florida, right? We got summer and spring. That's about it. We have 2 seasons, but most people have 4 seasons to choose from, and we in Florida will say, man, I love winter. I love the snow. I do too. Sitting in my computer chair, looking on the computer, seeing it at somebody else's place. I've lived where there's snow. They can have it. But everybody has their favorite season. Think about it. As I'm talking right now, you're thinking of your favorite season. Mine is spring. I love the springtime. And so there is favorite seasons, but we have to live through the ones we don't like. When we were in Oklahoma, Amy did not drive all winter long. She did not. When winter came, I knew I was driving everywhere. And so black ice, snow, all of that stuff on the road. She said, I'm from Florida. I don't know how to drive on this. I said, do you think I do? But she had just determined that was not her favorite season. But she didn't lock up, pack up, and say, I'll be in the back room. You call me when this season's over. No, we went to church. We went to the grocery store. We did everything that we were supposed to do. What are you saying, Pastor? I'm saying sometimes we just need to hold on, hold fast, stay in the house of bread until there's bread in the house. But this man could not do this. Elimelech determined we need to go to Moab. So he took his wife, he took his sons. I don't know if they had a family meeting and Naomi and the boys agreed with it or not. The Bible does not give us that intel, but we do know this. Naomi went with him. And Scripture tells us that after a while, in verse 3, Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. And they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelled there about 10 years. How many knows much about Orpah? You ever read the book of Orpah? Every time I read that name, I think of Oprah. Everybody knows who she is. She gives away free cars. But nobody knows. There is no book of Orpah, but the other was Ruth. And they dwelled there about 10 years. And Mahlon and Chilion died also, both of them. And the woman was left of her 2 sons and her husband. So here is Naomi. You see, now we're wondering, why does she say, don't call me pleasant? Life had not been pleasant, had it? She had to leave the house of bread, live 10 years in worldliness, live 10 years in Moab, live 10 years here in this place where she knew nobody, had nothing in common with anybody. Her gods weren't there. Her church wasn't there. The things that she knew was not there. But her husband was there and her sons were there, and that was enough. But now she lost her purpose. Her purpose, her husband died. She was a wife. She was in Moab because she was a good wife. And now she's in Moab as a good wife without her husband because he died. And if that wasn't bad enough, her 2 sons have died. And now her identity was, I'm a wife, I'm a mother. And so now both sons are gone, and this wife and this mother, this woman of God who was a godly wife, no doubt, was a godly mother, no doubt. She says, what's my purpose? I lost my identity. You ever heard anybody say they should have just buried me with them? That's about where Naomi was at. She had felt, I have no purpose. I have no identity. I have no reason to go on. And so she did make a good decision. I can't stay here. I'm going back to Bethlehem, Judea. I'm going back to the house of bread. She was in a place of bitterness. She was in a place of turmoil. But she did have 2 daughters-in-law. She had those 2 daughters-in-law, and I thought about this. Without a Naomi, there wouldn't have been a Ruth. There wouldn't have been the Ruth that we know. There would not have been the Ruth that we begin to cultivate. And I've read this many times, and I've preached along these lines many times. I've compared these 2 daughter-in-laws, and I've put this header on it before, and I'll just say it again. What we find unfold through verses 12 through 17 is this. One turned back, but another one held on. One of the daughter-in-laws said, I'll take you up on your offer to stay here. But Ruth said, some of the most familiar verses of this chapter is found here in these verses. Many times it's used, believe it or not, on wedding days, that a bride will use these words to her husband. But it's very interesting to know that those words came from a daughter-in-law to a mother-in-law. Listen to what it says in verses 12 through 17. It says, turn again, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say, I have hope, if I should have a husband also tonight, and should also bear sons, would you tarry for them till they were grown? She's just being real, isn't she? Would you stay for them from having husbands? Nay, my daughters, for it grieveth me much for your sakes, and the hand of the Lord is gone out against me. See where Naomi's at? She thinks that these girls are just there with her because of what she identified as, because she was the mother of their husbands. That may have been the case with one of them, but not the other. The impact of this bitter woman, she self-identified, I am bitter, I am empty, I'm too old to have a husband. As I read that, I said, well, that woman that I heard about a few weeks ago that's 90-something years old that just got married, she didn't feel like she was too old for it. But Naomi said, I'm too old for a husband. But she thought that her only source to these girls was to be their mother-in-law, to provide the provider of their husbands. That was not the case. How many knows that everything's not always the way you perceive it? You need to identify. She could not identify. In your circumstances, in your tough times, in your hardships, it's hard to identify. I'm not pounding. I'm not beating up. I'm not trying to be critical. But I am just saying I understand that it is difficult in difficult seasons for us to really identify. But why do we still choose to try to identify when we know we just cannot get a clear perspective of what things are supposed to be? We've got to think back before it was that way. Think about it. Before you entered this bitter season, before you entered this time, whatever it is for you, a season of loss, a season of emptiness, a season of hardship, understand that that is not who you are. Have you ever had somebody cop an attitude with you and immediately somebody with them, their loved one, whatever, said you have to forgive them. They're going through a lot right now. You ever been there? You ever seen that? Yeah, they speak up real quick. That's not them. And you know that. Sometimes we'll give people grace when they go off on us because we know that's out of their character. And we begin to say, what's wrong? What's bothering you? And, of course, they come back, ain't nothing bothering me. Right? I'm fine. Okay. See you later. I'm out. See, we have that liberty that when we're not in their circle that we say, I'm out. But there's some people that cannot say, I'm out. But Naomi gave Orpah and Ruth and Ruth an out. She gave them an out, didn't she? She said, just girls, just let me deal with this on my own. I'll be all right. I'm going home. I'm not okay right now, but I'll be okay. Y'all just go home. And listen to how it goes on. It says, would you tarry here, and the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. And then verse 14, they lifted up their voice and wept again. And Orpah, by the way, which means stiff-necked, since we're interpreting names, kissed her mother-in-law. But Ruth means remorse, clave unto her. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law. Ruth clave unto her. This is what Ruth said. Behold, or Naomi said this, and behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people and unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. It did not bother Naomi. Naomi was so bitter that it didn't bother her. The Orpah said, hey, thanks, Mom, but I'm gone. Kiss, kiss. See ya. It didn't bother her. She told Ruth, do the same thing. Do the same thing. I've already lost a husband. I've already lost 2 sons. So what if I lose 2 daughter-in-laws too? Just go. I want to be by myself. How many knows that's a terrible place to be in? Terrible place to be in. Another old saying is, no man is an island. That's a dangerous place. When you begin to isolate and you begin to think, just let me handle this all on my own. I'll just handle this by myself. Listen, she needed God, but she also needed those to mother because she was a mother. She needed someone to be a mom to. And Ruth needed someone to be a mom to her. We don't know much about Ruth's parents, but what we do know is they were of Moab and they did not serve Jehovah. They served other gods. Ruth said, I was raised in that and I've seen all of that and everything that I've seen in my childhood up until the time that I met your son does not compare to what I've seen in you, Naomi. And I know this is not you. You may be bitter now, but she is thinking to herself, you're the most pleasant woman I've I've ever met, and it's a matter of stay here or go with you. Ruth said in verse 16, entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee, for whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people. And this is the kicker, folks. Thy God, my God. Where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me. Why did Ruth have such a love? Do you think that Ruth, full of remorse and full of compassion, and had all of this love built up in her heart because Naomi was a bitter woman? No. She did not look at Mara and say, hey, Mara, I'm going wherever you go. Mara mean bitterness. She didn't say, hey, bitter mother-in-law, I'll deal with you, and I'm going to take care of your old sorry high, because there's no way you're going to make it all the way back, and I'm going to go and make sure you don't do something stupid, or I'm going to make sure that you don't die on the journey. No, that's not what Ruth said. Ruth said, I can't afford to lose you. I can't afford to lose your motherly guidance. I can't afford. You may have lost your identity. You may not identify, but I still identify who you are. Listen, Mom, you may think that you've lost your identity. You may have thought your identity was wrapped up in something, but there is somebody. It may not even be your blood child, but there is somebody that says, I identify that you're not bitter. You're so pleasant. Matter of fact, you're the most pleasant thing that ever happened to me. Through all of my childhood and through all the goofy sitcoms and things that I've watched through the years, there was one line from one show, I don't know why, but it stuck out to me. What's the guy's name that was, oh man, Kirk Cameron. This was before Kirk Cameron became known as a Christian, and all of this. The show that he had was Growing Pains. And on that show, it's senior year, I believe it is, and he has that goofy coach. How many remembers his goofy coach that bald-headed and has hair on the side? He's just kind of goofy, and I believe he's retiring at senior year. I can't remember how it is, but for some reason they use this one show to focus on this coach. And the coach tells his wife, Sister Gill, if I remember correctly, this is a long time ago. This was back when I was 12, 13 years old, so it's been a while. But I believe that he looked at his wife and he says, after all of my years of coaching and teaching, he said, I just want somebody to just say, I'm better off for having to know you, Coach. I'm better off for having to know you. And so the show progressed, and the character that Kirk Cameron plays, he goes to his coach, and he uses those lines. You have to remember the show. He's just very wordy, and he comes and he says a bunch of stuff, and Coach is just a simple guy, and he says, wait a minute, so what you're telling me is that you're better off for having known me? He said, well, I guess you could say that. Yes, Coach, I'm better off for having known you. And it just put a big smile on his face. But before this, he felt like all of my coaching, all of my teaching, all of my efforts was nothing. But can I tell you, there's somebody that's saying, Mom, I'm better off because you've been in my life. I'm better off for having known you. Oh, we know that those boys, they would say that. We know that that husband, he would say that, but they can't say that now. Orpah said, I respect you and I love you, but this is as far as I go. There's some people just going to go so far with you. But Ruth said, you've been so pleasant. You've impacted my life so much that wherever you go, I'm going. I'm following your lead. And so she did. She did. And you go back to our text. Could you imagine? Remember now, this is Naomi and Ruth standing here. They're entering in the city. And Ruth is standing back, and she's saying, wow, look at all these people. Think of the picture. Look what it says. It says, so they two went until they came to Bethlehem, and it came to pass when they were come to Bethlehem that all the city was moved about them. How many of us run and gather around bitterness? Right? We go to the other aisle in Walmart to get away from bitterness, right? No, they ran to her. They surrounded her. They were come to Bethlehem, and all the city moved about them, and they said, "Is this Naomi?" And she said unto them, "Call me not Naomi, call me not pleasant, call me Mara, call me bitter, for the Almighty hath dealt bitterly with me." Remember, Ruth is standing there. Ruth is standing there. Once again, the Bible does not give us facial expressions. It does not give us hand gestures. It does not give us anything. But I could imagine the look on Ruth's face as she's shaking her head. No, you're Naomi, woman. You're the Naomiest Naomi I've ever met. There's not another Naomi like you. There is no other woman in the world. And Ruth, this is Ruth's opinion. There's no other woman in this world that deserves to be named Naomi but you. Do you feel that way about your mother? I do about mine. There is no one more pleasant than you. Now, I'm going to try to make it through this part, and I'm going to hit it real quick. My mom was not a godly mom. She was not a Christian mom. But there was nobody more Naomi than my mom. There was no one to me more pleasant than my mom. You can go on my Facebook and you can read Remembering Mom, so I don't have to dialogue it here because I'll break down and fall to pieces in front of you. But my mom went through a difficult season and circumstances, and she come to the conclusion life is not pleasant. Life has been too bitter. Life is bitter, so I'm bitter, and she got bitter. But through all of that, she was still my mama, right? She could not see her identity, but I knew that her identity cultivated me. And I had time to tell her this before she went, but I had told her one time, but she was just laying it out there, and she was just so bitter and so upset and all with life. I said, "Mom, do you realize that I've been called to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ? I've been called to preach." She said, "Well, what does that mean to me? I'm your son. I wouldn't be here today. If you got saved under my ministry, can I tell you, you wouldn't have got saved under my ministry without Judy Wyatt. Judy Thompson was her maiden name. If she would not have been born, I would have not have been born. You may have got saved, but you wouldn't be under my ministry. I wouldn't be your pastor today." Listen, she thought she was bitter. She thought there was nothing. Maybe sometimes it's not who you are, but it's who you raise. It's not what you've been through, but it's what God is going to do through you. It may not be. You've got to identify when we make it about us. Our life is so much about our circumstances. And could it be for such a time as this and such a season as this that the very one that God brought through you? Think about Mary. It says she's pondered all this in her heart. She looks up there and sees her son hanging on the cross. But you know what else she saw? Her Savior on the cross. Do you know who was able to witness and testify to my mom? Not a preacher from down the road. Not somebody else. But her 15-year-old son standing in the living room. When she told me one day, "I've heard that my whole life," and these words came from my mouth. I said, "Yeah, Mom, but," in all her bitterness, she didn't want to hear it. In her backslidden state, Brother Jeremy, she did not want to hear what I had to say. She said, "I don't want to hear all that," because I was listening. You remember Wendy and Shanna used to come through Pentecostal Expression? Used to come through Wayside. You remember them, Brother Jeremy? They sing that song, and they were singing songs about the coming of the Lord and conversation, just some wonderful songs. And I've got my Walkman on. Anybody remember what that is? I had my Walkman on going through the house. Mom said, "What you listening to?" I was like, "Huh? What you listening to?" I pull it off, and she asked, so I told her. She goes, "Oh." And I said, "Oh, and by the way, Mom, he is coming back. He's coming back." She said, "Oh, son, I've heard that my whole life, and he hadn't came back yet." I said, "But he's closer now than he was then." I put my headset back on and went back to it. I the one that she birthed. See, she was in a place of bitterness, but God still brought the results of that was who she was, a reminder of who she was. Because you see, my mom was a Sunday school teacher when she was 19 years old. But see, she had forgot about that. Life circumstances, that's not who I am anymore. That's not what I identify. You better identify this morning, Mom. It's not about where you're at now. It's not about what you're going through now. You've heard the call of Jesus. You've heard the purpose. You may have been led in the worldliness. You may have been led out into the streets of this world. But be as Naomi and say, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to find my way back home. And God says, Naomi, if you're going to find your way back to the house of bread, I'm going to send a reminder with you. I'm going to send somebody to remind you exactly who you are. She didn't have the boys anymore, Sister Joyce. But she had Ruth. Mom, what do I do about this? Mom, what do I do about that? See, in Naomi and all of her pleasantness and all of her time that she spent in the early years of her raising her boys, she never had a daughter. This is all, as I read the book of Ruth and study the book of Ruth, this always fascinates me. Because Ruth comes with her, and Ruth goes out, and she begins to work to try to provide for her and Naomi. She's gleaning in the field. And Boaz sees Ruth. Who's that? Ruth must have been a looker. Who is that? Well, this is who she is. She came with Naomi. He said, you dropped some hands full on purpose for her. And Ruth's like, oh, awesome. Hey, guys, you dropped something. They didn't even look back. Well, Ruth thinks nothing of it. She just thinks, well, they just dropped it. She didn't know it was hands full on purpose. Right? That's what Scripture says, handfuls on purpose. And so she takes up those hands full on purpose. It's just free food to her. And she comes back. She don't realize, she don't understand what's going on. But Naomi does. She walks in the door. Honey, where'd you get all that? Well, I was gleaning in the field. Whose field? Right? Whose field? Naomi knows a thing or two. Because she's seen a thing or two. I love that commercial. She says, whose field? Well, I think his name was Boaz. He's got eyes for you. Here's what you need to do. All of a sudden, bitter Naomi's not feeling bitter anymore. She's feeling purpose. She's sitting there waiting for Ruth to come home every day. Tell me what happened today, Ruth. Tell me what happened today. But you know what? If she would have stayed in Moab, that wouldn't have happened. Not just if Naomi would have stayed in Moab, but if Ruth would have stayed in Moab. But even through Naomi's loss, even through Naomi's bitterness, even through her thinking the Lord has dealt badly with me and the Lord has done all of this, she must have had a degree of pleasancy that she kept, because Ruth says, I'm going with you because I am not identifying you with your season. Oh, aren't you thankful? Thankful that God has given you such an identity. There's going to be some children. There's going to be some in-laws. There's going to be some friends. There's going to be a city that will gather around you. There's going to be a household of faith that says, I don't, because you know what? She tells the city, don't call me Naomi. Call me Ruth. But I've read the whole chapter, the whole book a few times, and I never see where anybody says, hey, Mara. Nobody. Okay. Okay, Naomi. Okay. We get it. Naomi, you're still pleasant to us. Just because you don't feel pleasant, Mom, don't mean you're not still pleasant to us. Sister Amanda made the statement earlier, and I get this, because dads feel the same way, believe it or not. Little plug for us, dads. Moms feel underappreciated sometimes. Dads feel underappreciated sometimes. Hey, kids, give me an amen. Kids feel underappreciated sometimes. At least one of them does. The rest of them's not honest. Sometimes we just feel unappreciated. Amen? But that does not change our identity. It does not change your identity. We can change our name. We can change our direction. We can say we change our beliefs. But it does not change our identity. It does not change our identity. I told Sister Pat a few weeks ago, I said, Sister Pat, we're living in a society today that if you don't like your identity, you can change it. So it'd be a good time to identify as tall. Right? 2 weeks later, I said, Sister Pat, how's that working out for you? She said, what? I said, identifying as tall. She said, not so good. I said, because you're still short. We don't set our identity. Just like God created me to be 6'1", He created Sis Pat to be 3'8". How tall are you? Oh, I'm sorry, 4'11 and a half. We do not change our identity. God has already said that. So nobody ever called her Mara. And Ruth 4:19-13 says, Boaz did have eyes for Ruth. You have to read that. That's a whole other story, a whole other message. That's kind of like for a singles retreat or a newlywed deal or something. I don't know. It's a love story that unfolds. And Boaz does everything that he needs to do to make Ruth his wife. What does this mean to Naomi? Hold on, we're going to get there. And Boaz said unto the elders and unto all the people, Ye are witness this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Chilion's and all that was Mahlon's of the hand of Naomi. Moreover, notice how he just throws all that, surrounds it with all this. Oh, by the way, and there's Ruth. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, hath I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren, and from the gate of his place. You are witness to this day. And all the people that were in the gate and the elders said, We are witnesses. The Lord make the woman that is come into thine house like Rachel and like Leah, which two built the house of Israel. And do thou worthily in Ephraim, and be famous in Bethlehem. And let thy house be like the house of Pharez, whom Tamar bare unto Judah, of the seed which the Lord shall give thee of this young woman. He's talking about a Moabitess. They're saying, let this woman in your house be blessed. You know that he is talking about matriarchs? Let her be like one of the matriarchs. This is some Moabite, some girl out in the world that Naomi, somehow her sons ended up there, and one of her sons married him, they died, and brought it back. Nobody in that city said, wait a minute, there's a rebuttal. We don't agree with this. There's no way, she don't deserve that. Boaz, you should be marrying my daughter. Boaz, man, there's something about this guy. It's not about him. He said, I'm raising up this seed, not for me, but for the remembrance of those that fell on hard times, those that went away, those that lost so much, but listen to what he called her. He did not do this for Mara. He did not do this for Mara. Who did he do it for? Naomi. Because she did not lose her identity in the eyes of Boaz, in the eyes of the city. Oh, listen, those that truly love you and have invested in you, no matter how you feel about yourself, no matter what you've called yourself, no matter how you identify now, that does not change the fact that you're still pleasant in the eyes of those who know your identity in Christ. So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife. And when he went in unto her, the Lord gave her a conception, and she bare a son. She bare a son. In closing this morning, verse 14. And the women said unto Naomi, don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara. She didn't stop them. Hey, Naomi. She didn't stop them this time. Blessed be the Lord which hath not left thee this day without a kinsman, that his name may be famous in Israel. And it shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life, and a nourisher in thine old age. For thy daughter-in-law which loveth thee, which is better to thee than 7 sons, hath borne him. And Naomi, Mara will never do this. Naomi will. Took the child and laid it in her bosom and became nurse unto it. Mom had lost her identity. She wanted to trade her identity for another identity. She said, I'm no longer a mom. I've lost my sons. I'm no longer a wife because I've lost my husband. God said, I'm not finished yet. God said, I'm not done yet. But that season calls her to say, I don't even want to be called Naomi anymore. I want to change my name. I want to change my identity. I want to change everything. But because somebody did not forget who she was and let her continue to be what God called her to be, even when she didn't think she could, we see that this happens, that she's a nurse under this child. And the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying there is a son, get this, there is a son born to Naomi. There's a son born to Naomi. Naomi is not this child's mother. Right? There had to be, hold on before I say that. Are there any Karens in the house? There had to be a Karen in that moment, as they call them now. There had to be a naysayer, let's put it that way. Back there, Naomi ain't even his grandma. I don't know what's going on here. Boaz is not her son. Do y'all understand anything about anything? Ain't none of her blood. If there was social media, they'd have been all over it, right? There is no way. What's going on over there? Who does Naomi think she is? Holding that child? But you couldn't have told Ruth that. But more importantly, you couldn't have told Boaz that. Boaz, who is that child's grandmother? My mom and Naomi. My mom and Naomi. But really? Yes, really. Case closed. They called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David, the lineage of Jesus. But do you know what the name, since we're dealing with names this morning, you know what Obed means? Worshipper. Worshipper. Naomi had no worship because she wanted to be Mara. Mara don't worship. Right? Mara could not produce a worshiper. But Naomi could. If Naomi would have continued to let bitterness rule her when she got back to the house of bread. It's amazing to me that she was content with Mara, and even as she came into the house of bread, she was content with the name of bitterness. But she could not keep that name when she was back in the house of bread. She could not keep that name at the Father's house. Bethlehem means Father's house. Bethlehem, Judea means house of bread. She couldn't keep that name anymore. Because if she had kept that name when Ruth would have came in that first day with all that, who'd you steal that from? I knew I should have left your sorry behind back in Moab, right? I should have known better. I bring you here to my home. I bring you to my people. And this is what you do. You rob somebody, right? That's what Mara would have done. That's what bitterness does. No. It was not Mara that responded in that first moment, that first encounter. Why? Because though Naomi lost her identity, God left somebody in her life that continued to remind her who she was. Mom, no matter where you're at, no matter how much you think you've lost your identity as a mother, there is someone in your life reminding you, if that nobody else is but me today, here I am. You are not bitter. You're pleasant. You're not worthless, useless. Your labor has not been in vain. You've invested, and God has a purpose, and God wants to birth worship in and through you today. Stand with me this morning. Every mother in this house, I want you to remind you, just as Naomi lost her identity was never lost. You may have lost your identity, but I want you to identify this morning, your identity is not lost. You are not what your circumstances say you are. You are not the season that you're going through. You are who God has chosen you to be. God has not chosen you to birth bitterness. God has chosen you to birth worship. God has chosen you to cultivate worship. God's going to do the impossible. God's going to do the impossible. Father, I pray this morning that each mother here today will be reminded of their true identity in you. You've created mothers as a precious gift to us because none of us would be here without our mothers. We're thankful, God, because when we read your word, you even put the emphasis on bringing Jesus, God in flesh, on this earth through the same way that you brought each one of us through a mother. Through a mother. You saw the importance of that. You chose Mary because she said, behold, the handmaid of the Lord. There's mothers here in this room at some point in their life, they said, behold, the handmaid of the Lord, and you used them mightily, that life circumstances made them say, oh, that's not who I am anymore. And they walked away from that. But I believe that you're sending a reminder to someone this morning, in the midst of their bitterness, in the midst of their identifying as bitter, no, you're still pleasant. You're still the apple of my eye. You're still what I called you to be. You're still what I've chosen you to be. And it's not just empty words. You're going to begin to bring them into a new season, reminding them of how pleasant they really are, and reminding them of their investment that they have to give. They still have more to give. They may have lost their children. They may have lost their husband. They may have lost their identity in their eyes. But their identity stays intact in your eyes. And I pray, God, that you'll send that reminder to each mom today. Each mom today. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Maybe you're here this morning, Mom, and you are in just a season of bitterness.